So now we have our hero section set up, but we've still got to create that nav bar. So that's what we're going to look at in this lesson. Specifically, we're going to be looking at something called the header builder. Now this is something that Oxygen has, which has got some great features for creating, menus and stuff that you want in the header. There's a few things to go through, and I think they're really, really important. So I'm going to slow this one down, and I'm going to take you through every step of the header builder. So let's check it out. So here we are in Oxygen, and we're going to take a good look at this header builder. Now, you don't always have to use the header builder. You could use something to create your navigation area, like a section with columns left and right. But there are some really cool features that will save you time and gives you a bit more flexibility with using the header builder. So I'm going to use that in this situation, and I use it fairly often. So let's get started. I'm going to do a few things, and of course, like before, we're going to reference this XD file just to match up some of the things that we are doing here. Now the first thing I want to do is make sure I've clicked nav, and I'm going to give this a background color just so I can see what's going on. Yes, you'll notice that in the XD file that this is transparent, and we will get to that, so that's okay, but let's just get some of this set up first. Now you'll notice here that we've got this thing called a header row, and you can actually create other rows. So you can add another row in here, just like we've done. And actually in this instance, we are going to have another row. I'm going to give this a background color here, just darker, and we'll see why in a minute. But just know that you can add multiple rows, and then you can do a few things like hide that row in a different situation. So that can be quite interesting if you wanted to create a navigation that only shows when something is like on mobile, for example. This is an easier way to do that, where you can separate these out and treat them differently. But in this situation, we want to keep them both active. All right, so let's get back here. If I open these up, you'll both see that they have the same setup where we have a left, a center, and a right. Now you can't actually change this. Some people think, well, why can't I delete the center? Why can't I delete the right? But if you don't have anything in any of these, I guess you'd call them sections or containers. If you don't have anything in them, they just won't show up on the front end, and that's totally fine. That's actually what we want. So you don't really need to worry if you have something in the left and in the right. This center area here, it just doesn't really display. It minimizes down as if there's nothing in there. Now in some instances, you might want to use the center row. You might want to have a centered nav, for example, or you might put a logo centered and have part of your navigation left and part of your navigation right. Now, of course, we're trying to match our design here. So what we're going to do is put our logo in this left. So if we click that, and yes, you can't actually select these because you can't change the settings, but if you do click one, you notice that it does sort of highlight for a second. Now I can go add and insert an image. I'm going to upload this logo, select that. Now straight away, you'll notice something, that my header isn't actually full width like it is in this design here. Now we can change that fairly simply by going to our nav, going into advanced, size and spacing, and changing this from page width to full width. And now if we click save and go back here, scroll up to the top, you'll notice that that's actually expanding the full width rather than sitting into that fixed page width. We're going to want to put some navigation in, but at this stage, I'm not going to set up the menu. We're going to do a full lesson on the menu because there's a few options with the menu. And I'm going to wait till we have some pages set up. So we're just going to kind of fake a few things. Now, the first thing I want to do is just put like a text link in here. So I'm just going to grab about for a second. So I go back to this right column here. If I go add something like text link, if it adds into a different row, you can just drag it around to put it in the right place. That's okay. We've got our about. And now we can stick a couple more things in. We're going to stick in the social icons. So let's go social. And these, we want to style these a little bit. So we've got some options around here. So let's scroll down, make sure we select these as circle, give it a background color. I'm pretty sure it's white. And then I want to make these icons blue. Yep, that looks right. Now they're really large. So let's bring them down to say 28 pixels. You can see here that this icon, social media icon builder, allows you just to put the links in. And if you don't want something like Twitter, we can just delete that and it already updates for us. Now let's give some size and spacing to this, maybe 20 pixels and 20 pixels. The last thing we want to add in here is a link wrapper. You could use a button if you wanted to, but I'm going to put a link wrapper in here with some text, and our text says request a quote. So we'll paste that in there. Now we want to change this a little bit because we want our button, our link wrapper, to have the background color of our green, and we want our text to be blue. So we'll go into typography and we'll change the text color to blue, and we'll also bump that weight up a little bit to say 700. Now you'll see already that this hasn't got the right amount of spacing, so we're going to want to put some padding on this to give that the right sort of space. So we can go in here and maybe add a little bit of spacing here. 25, whoops, 25, 25, and then say 20, 20. Now one thing you'll notice here is that with this header builder, it does actually give an automatic padding or margin of 20 pixels. So to offset that, what we want to do is add a negative margin of 20 pixels on our link wrapper. And if we click save and refresh that, you can see we've got our nav sort of starting to come together. We'll put a rollover on this. We've done this sort of technique before, so I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but we'll just go into this, add a few things, for example, like change our background color to say something like a light blue, or maybe change this to the white, and we'll give that an actual rollover effect by going to effects and to transition 0.3, and now we'll have a rollover effect when we roll over this button here. Perfect. We've got a phone number to add, and you'll see that that's below here, and this is why I have this other row. So I'm going to go down here and put in another text link, and we'll drag this into the right place and add our phone number. Give this some color, so text color, and again we're going to want to give this some padding. What I'm going to do here is actually give this a specific height. So I'm going to go to size and spacing and say give this a height of 50 pixels. Now I'm going to want to set this so it's positioned in the middle also. So we can go back to a layout, make sure this is set as flex, and center this both. So now we've got this text link working how we want. There's a few other things that we need to get this logo working, how it looks in the design. Now I actually want this double color here, and I want the logo to be a part of this, and it's kind of overlapping. So I'm going to go into the size and spacing and actually give this a negative margin of say 50 pixels and have that so it comes across. I'm also going to add a little bit more padding here of say 10 pixels. So this looks pretty good. I'm fairly happy with that. I'm going to click save and have a quick check. That's looking fairly good. Now, as we know, this was transparent, and this is where some of the really cool features with the header builder come into play. So if we click the nav here, you'll see we've got a few options here. You can do a few things like say stack vertically, which means that everything will fall into line at certain points in time. So you could stack this to fall vertically at say less than the page container, and you'll see that underneath that what's going on is everything starts to stack vertically. And I've got some negative margins here, so it's kind of looking a bit weird, but we'll fix that up as we get to doing the mobile responsive part. But for now, let's just change this so we're looking at this as normal and say never stack vertically, and we'll sort this out later. What I want to show you now here is that what you can do with this is choose to have this as overlay. So if we go to overlay and you can say we always want this to be overlaid, it's always going to be displayed in front of our image. You'll see that the background there disappears. So if we click refresh here, you'll see this is working exactly how we want. Perfect. There's another cool feature here, which is to be able to turn this to sticky. So if we go in here, we can say enable sticky header, and it gives us a few options. So for example, again, when we want this to be sticky, so we might not want this sticky in mobile. So let's keep this so that's always sticky above, say, a sort of small tablet size. So you're going to see it on desktop. I'm going to have a little feature like fade in on the sticky after, say, 0.3 seconds. And while I'm here, I'm actually going to set a Z index, and you'll see why later. It's important to put a Z index here because if we don't, it's going to stick this really, really high, and it can be hard to put stuff in front of this sticky nav, like a modal window or a gallery pop-up or something like that. So I'm going to put this as 400, and I tend to work within, I guess, groups of 100. So I'll put standard stuff in, say, a 100, and you can have 101, 102, and it gives you a fair amount of space. I put my navigation in 400, and I know that nothing else is going to be in that 400 level, so I can choose anything above 400 to go above it, or anything under 400, and I'll know that it'll be underneath the nav. So I'll click save here, and you'll see here what happens with our sticky nav. If we scroll down now, we'll see that our sticky nav fades in, and this is where our background colors start to show again. That looks really good. That's actually what I was hoping for. Like I said, we're going to change this and put the navigation in later. We've got our basic stuff set up here. One last little thing that I want to point out is you'll notice there's just a little soft shadow here. If we go here, it gives us the ability to put a shadow here. So we could change this to say something like 8 to make this, I guess, easier to see. And these settings are essentially the distance on the X, the Y, and then the amount of blur, and then this is the color. So 0, 0, 0, which is essentially black, and then 8% of black. So you should see this with a 10% or 10 pixel blur and fairly dark now. So if I refresh, you'll see that our shadow is going to be much, much darker here. Now, an effect that I personally like is to kind of remove the blur from everything. So I'm going to make this 0 pixels, but just make this really, really soft. So say a 2, and give this an offset of, say, 10. And that's because I like this sort of clean line look with stuff. So if I scroll now, you'll see I've got a shadow that's just underneath there. It's just giving this sort of soft shadow so you can tell that the nav is ending. And it also almost fits in with the same sort of aesthetic of this navigation area. So we're almost done with this nav. There's a few things that we probably want to fix up for our mobile responsiveness. You can see it's working fairly good until we get here. But I'm not actually going to do all of the work on this now. I'm going to wait until we put in the real navigation. So we put the navigation button in with the real menu in here. We'll be doing this later on when we create all of our pages so we can create a real menu. But now we can see we've got our basic header section working, and you have a good idea of what the header builder is and how it works. And now we have our whole hero section done, complete with our hero image, our text, and of course that new header builder menu section. Let's keep going. You know what to do. Click complete, and I'll see you in the next lesson.